Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two Way tonight. It's March 17th, and lots of developments in Iran. There's some other news in the world, but we'll focus on Iran this evening, and we've got a great group of guests to help us through that. Um, always have to luck out that the news matches the guests, and tonight we have just that good fortune. We have four great guests and lots of opportunities to take your questions and comments. So if you're here on the Two Way platform and you'd like to be part of the conversation with our guests, please raise your hand. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, do not raise your hand and do not put smack in the chat. Lives could be at risk if you put smack in the chat, and peace, love, and understanding is how we operate here. Let me tell you about the headlines, and there's a bunch of headlines. This morning, on the morning meeting, we were there when news broke that the two top Iranian officials, including Larjani, have been killed, and the fallout from that has continued apace for the last 8 hours, including moments ago a tweet from his account. There was Israelis announced that he'd been killed, and there were some Iranian officials who tweeted about it, basically confirming it. But now his account has tweeted and confirmed his own death. So we'll talk about that and the implications of that, and this great debate that exists between those who say the more Iranian officials, government officials who are killed, the more the new officials will be dug in to to hold on no matter what. No regime change, no surrender. That's a school of thought that I respect and totally disagree with. I just think human nature is the more of these people who are killed, the more likely the new people will be to want to give up and save their lives. But I'm eager to hear what our guests say about that. President Trump today announced failure, and I can't think of an historical analog for this. Again, eager to hear what our guests say about this. A failure in building any sort of coalition to try to unclog the Strait of Hormuz. And the president and his team spent a few days trying to build a coalition. And having failed, the president said, sucks to them, but we didn't need them, which again raises the question of why he spent so much time trying to build a coalition. And the question of control of the Strait continues to be in the short term, really a very important question. Resignation today by Mr. Kent, who worked for Tulsi Gabbard. And you can either say his resignation is a meaningless bureaucratic departure from somebody most people have never heard of, or you can say it's symbolically important and will lead eventually, if the war continues, to mass resignations from MAGA people within the administration. Again, curious to see what our guests think, but he wrote his departure letter, and late reporting from the Washington Post says yesterday he met with the Vice President of the United States, along with Tulsi Gabbard. Kindred spirits on the question of America's role around the world, but he quit today, and the president commented on Kent's resignation. We'll show you that, and we'll talk about that. I thought there was one more war point, but maybe I'm wrong about that. There's some other things, odds and ends, but those are the three main things we're going to talk about: the Kent resignation, the implications of the death of the killing of Larjani, and the latest on the failure of the United States to build a coalition of the willing to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Our guests will be here in a moment. We'll run through the headlines and some of the sound bites with them. And then again, as I said, eager to hear your questions and comments. If you're here on the platform, please raise your hand. Let's get some sponsor work in, though, to clear the decks of that. And first, Cozy Earth, 20% off everything on the site, cozyearth.com. Bubble cuddle blanket, sheets, towels, pants, socks, everything available to you. And it's a wonderful opportunity, if you haven't tried any of their products, to try them. You hear almost every day here from satisfied fellow members of the two-way community who love their Cozy Earth stuff. You can include me in that. Comfort that carries you from the morning till night, throughout your day, with products that feel differently because they're made differently. Every detail is intentional, so every day feels quietly elevated. Go to cozyearth.com right now and browse around, look for something that appeals to you, and get it with your discount because you're a member of the two-way community. 20% off using the promo code two-way. If you get the post-purchase survey, please say you heard about Cozy Earth right here on Two-Way Tonight. Experience the craft behind the comfort, and again, make every day feel intentional. cozyearth.com, promo code two-way for 20% off. Also get 20% off from our friends at fastgrowingtrees.com. I had a great talk with someone today about fastgrowingtrees.com because they tried it. I ran into someone on the street here in Manhattan, and they said they bought a tree not for their Manhattan house, but for their parents' house where they visit regularly. And They're loving it. Fastest growing, it's the largest and most trusted online nursery. Thousands of trees planted, over 2 million happy customers. All you do is go on the website. You can get some help about that. You put in where you live and what kind of climate and what kind of tree or plant or bush that you want. And they'll give you lots of options. They'll tell you what will work. You look at the price and you get 20% off. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com, promo code two-way for 20% off. And if you're looking for something that fits inside, you can do that. Something that goes outside that you replant, you can do that. But thrill of a lifetime, as I've told you before, when you go get your mail and there's a tree in the mail in a big giant box, you just rip it open and there you got a tree or more than one. Fastgrowingtrees.com, promo code two-way for 20% off. All right, here are our guests, ladies and gentlemen, and they're good ones. Honored to have them all here. I was about to bring one in and he disappeared. Like when that happens, makes me laugh. Let's try again. Here's Eli. I don't know why Eli went away. Eli Lake is back. He hasn't been here in a while because he's got his own work to do. Eli Lake, grateful to you for being here. Of course, as all of you know, Eli's a columnist for the Free Press and a great foreign policy and national security thinker because he's not wedded to any ideology or party. He just writes what he thinks is true. Eli, welcome. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks so much for having me. I love the show.
All right. Glad that you're here. All right. I believe Fred's making his first appearance here. I might be wrong. I have a horrible memory. Fred Fleitz, welcome in. Former Chief of Staff of the National Security Council, CIA analyst, and a man also, again, without fear or favor, says what he thinks and brings a wealth of experience to this. Fred, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you again, Mark.
And then my two heroes from the diplomatic corps, John Fowler is here from International Intrigue, the great daily newsletter. John and his colleagues, former Australian diplomats who realized diplomacy wasn't all it was cracked up to be, so why not become quasi-journalists and write a great daily newsletter? I've recommended it to you before. It costs $0.00, and it's a great daily summary of everything going on around the world, not from a journalistic point of view so much as experienced diplomats. John, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Always a pleasure.
All right. And then lastly, cavalcade of guests, Helen Zhang is here, also John's colleague from International Intrigue. Helen, also former diplomat stationed many places, including, if my memory serves correct, in Israel for a time. So right. particularly valuable always to have you here to talk about what's going on in the Middle East. Thank all four of you for being here. You guys are just going to talk. I'm going to throw out topics and you guys chat amongst yourselves like you're out to dinner and I'm on the phone trying to get my car out of the valet parking or whatever it is. Let's start. And again, grateful to you all for being here. Here's the headlines from the day starting this morning. Number one, please, about these two extraordinary assassinations. I'll call them assassinations. Other people might have some other terms for them, but I'll call them assassinations. And very purposely, the Israelis have continued to decapitate. Israel's decapitation strategy wipes out another two top Iranians. The attacks on Iran's security chief and the head of the Basij military could make leaders more cautious, complicating the communications needed to run the war. Here's a great reporting. The New York Times is one of the few reporters, and I read everything, who actually can talk to people in Iran like government sources and quote them, at least on background. Here's the headline from the New York Times, number 3, please. Here we go. Ali Larijani's killing is fueling anxiety even before an official announcement. And here is the pull quotes from that. Number 4, please. And these, again, are extraordinary. You just don't see reporting like this from very many folks out of Iran. 2 Iranian officials described their security concerns. One said he received calls from other officials worrying about the safety of Iran's leaders as well as their own safety. They all wondered who would be next to be targeted, he said. Wow. Another official said he shook when he received a call of the news of Mr. Larijani's killing. There was a pervasive sense of anxiety. He said that Israel would not stop until all of Iran's leaders were killed and the Islamic Republic toppled. Now, again, you could say that they're impervious to this and it's going to make them dig in. But these 2 quotes buttress what I've long said, which is if you kill a lot of them, nobody's going to want the job and it's going to disrupt command and control. Lastly, moments ago, the man himself from beyond the grave, someone had his Twitter password and they went on X and they tweeted this. Here it is. That's the tweet. There's his picture of himself and a quote. Do we have the English translation? Because I ain't reading that. Here we go. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, dear and proud nation of Iran, to the Muslim people and the free people of the world, the servant of God has joined God. Indeed, one of the servants of Allah has joined his Lord as a martyr. So, it's sort of the opposite of Mark Twain. Reports of his death were not at all exaggerated. And he's the first Iranian official from beyond the grave to confirm it. So, with that wind up, let's talk about this. Fred, what are the implications of these latest two assassinations?
Well, I think these airstrikes have been extremely successful, but one objective has not been regime change, but regime weakening to create the opportunity for the Iranian people to take back their country. I don't think this is going to be easy, but because we're not going to invade the country, the best we can do is to destroy the organs of repression that have been keeping down the Iranian people and to take out officials like this who have been responsible for these mass crackdowns and, frankly, executions. I would call them genocide of the Iranian people. We see reports that there are Iranian people who are ready to rebel, ready to demonstrate. There was some pretty good coverage on Twitter today of an apartment building. You couldn't see anybody protesting, but you could hear them cheering from their apartment rooms. They're afraid to come out. I think they're going to come out. I think that there have been thousands of security officials who have left their jobs, that there's been defections. I hope that the defections have been enough that the people are able to move forward, because I think this regime, its days are numbered.
That's a very optimistic appraisal. And most of the reporting we've seen, Fred, in the last few days from the Washington Post, which despite its decimation by its owners is still pretty strong in these areas, suggests that the Israeli appraisal is that the regime is holding on. I hope you're right. Eli, what do we know about the Israeli efforts, and to the extent the United States also, to not just destabilize the regime, which they're obviously doing, as Fred said, but to arm or encourage or empower people who might either defect from within the government, from different parts of the government, or to rise up from the civilian class?
Well, the Israelis definitely have a regime change strategy. I think that there's a little bit of confusion. There was a pretty good piece about the assessment is that for now, they shouldn't go on the streets, and that is what Trump and Netanyahu have said explicitly. Don't go out right now. They'll be slaughtered. But I think the idea is that there will be enough regional unrest that it will strain the resources, geographically speaking, of the Basiji and the IRGC, which are like sort of the regime's instruments of repression, that'll be very difficult to concentrate forces in one area. That's what you saw with Tiananmen Square, which is that you saw the unrest in the capital, and the Chinese military was able to send all their forces there. Imagine if you had Tiananmen, but also 10 other cities and provinces in an uprising, then it would be much more difficult. Add to that, there's a psychological and very lethal war that's going on against just local Basiji commanders. You're seeing videos of these drones that are hitting the Basiji at the checkpoints. That's a new capability. I would almost go so far as to say it's a kind of, we're looking at, when you add it all together, maybe a revolution in military affairs of sorts. And then add to that there have been messages that have been sent to both Basiji commanders and officers, but also their families apparently, that are saying, stay home, don't show up. Then there's another element, which is that the Israelis are hacking Iranian banks that pay the salaries of these kinds of things. So what if they don't get paid? Then, on top of all of that, the Israelis have long had relationships with various kinds of Iranian opposition groups. I'm in the middle of reporting right now on efforts from the Iranian diaspora to try to come up with a kind of coalition of all these groups. They haven't done it yet, but it might be coming soon. They have a relationship with Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the late Shah.
Let me just stop you. There's a coalition of groups outside the country.
Outside, but also with kind of political prisoner buy-in from inside. It's an inside-outside, but they also are representing, Iran is a very cosmopolitan country. It's not a majority Persian ethnicity, so you've got Awazi Arabs and Kurds, and you've got, an Azeri population. A lot of them are very assimilated, but there are various kinds of ethnic factions within Iran that have a kind of representative. The Israelis have been in touch with them. So I think the Israelis have a lot of tricks up their sleeve. That doesn't mean it's going to necessarily succeed right away, but I do think that their plan is to eventually have almost what I would imagine as sort of a color revolution with close air support. We've never seen that before, but I actually think that is putting together the mosaics and doing my own reporting. I think that's what the Israelis have in mind.
And is that planes or helicopters? What is that?
I
or
think
drones?
that they have drones. They have lethal drones, and I think those lethal drones they have established, and this is kind of remarkable for a country that doesn't have an army invading the country. So there isn't like, a military camp they can go back to. So this is all Mossad probably, but they've established that they can get drones up in the air and they can shoot these guys at checkpoints, and they've done it enough times and then they film it. That's kind of extraordinary. Again, we're seeing a lot of things we've never seen before.
Yeah, amazing.
And this kind of science fiction that's coming out, I think the regime is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, Helen, let me ask you what I think is a very hard question, but I think you'll be able to answer it. Eli just unfurled a bunch of incredible reporting about stuff that he says is going on. Obviously, Mossad and the U.S. intelligence knows a lot about what's going on the ground and knows a lot about what's happening with some of the outside groups. Not just who knows the most about this, but where's the war room that's organizing this? Where's the war room that's really knows, like, all right, there's this neighborhood group. If we got them some rifles, they could do this. Where's that? Where's the center of that activity, if it exists at all?
I mean, if we're talking about the Israelis, obviously, I think that exists within Israel, and Netanyahu's war council, as well as the 8200, which are the cyber units within Israel.
Right.
I do want to respond to Eli's last comment, which is that we're seeing something that is unprecedented. I actually don't think this is unprecedented.
Oh.
I think it's been unfurling in front of us with the Ukraine-Russia war for the last, 5 years, but we just haven't really been paying attention to the dynamics there of shifting drone warfare, swarm warfare, AI autonomous warfare fighting in that arena. And so I think what we're seeing is just borrowed tactics from that arena into this arena, but it's at a larger scale, involving much more broader, deeper targets and more global assets as well. And so that's why we're probably seeing it and being exposed for the first
Helen,
time.
can I just
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Yes,
go
please.
on.
This is where I think
Eli.
it's a revolution. This is the revolution in military affairs. It's the ability, without an army on the ground, to target the leadership precisely and again. We saw that with the strike on Hassan Nasrallah. He's not a head of state, but certainly in Hezbollah. We saw it with one of the big strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. And now we saw it in the 12-day war from June, where they took out something like 40 generals within the first hours. And then we saw it in the opening, and then we saw it again last night with the Larijani strike. So that's the part which I think is revolutionary, which is the ability to target the leadership from the air without an army and to get it right. I mean, lots of armies.
I think we're on the same page. I mean, especially considering how far away Israel is physically from Iran and how large the territory is. I mean, Iran is the size of Alaska.
You both arguments could be made, whether it's qualitatively or quantitatively different. The fact that a superpower is doing it in consultation with a junior partner, we've never seen that. And for all the skill the Ukrainians and to some extent the Russians have shown, what U.S. and Israel are doing is just of a different order of sophistication. Not just assassinations, but I mean, incredible stuff some of which we don't even know about. Helen, I'm sorry, finish up.
Oh,
and then
no,
John,
you're fine. It was the last thing I was going to say is that Israel has been preparing for this, I think, since the end of the Yom Kippur War, basically. And so all of the sort of the breadth and the length of the record that they have and what they've been keeping on top of Israel, in addition to the intelligence sharing that they have with the Gulf states over the years, is contributing to this full picture that we're seeing.
Yeah. John, obviously people talk about regime change, but yesterday there was the back and forth about whether Witkoff had talked to the foreign minister. There's all these alleged conversations, maybe European, maybe Gulf state. What do you sense or what do you know about the possible off-ramp of basically a Venezuela situation, which is maybe, members of the current regime stay in place, but they begin to hand over the nuclear material. They begin to give America, the president's 20% vig of the oil revenue, whatever it is. Where do you think the prospect of that stands? Because we saw the speaker of the parliament make noises about that 2 days in a row now, I think. So where do you think that stands? What channels exist, and how likely is it that could produce an off-ramp here for the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is I don't know, but the new leader who, Pete Hegseth has said is injured or he's somewhere. I don't know how sort of integral he is at the moment, but he isn't someone who seems to me like he wants to negotiate now. I know that what's his name? It's Mojtaba Khamenei, right? And he said that until there is a full peace, not just a ceasefire, not just a kind of an American agreement to sort of stop attacking or bombing, the Strait of Hormuz will stay closed. So if his red line is we need full and lasting peace to do anything, to come to the table. And
Yeah.
obviously the US is unlikely to do that. I don't know where that off-ramp is right now. And I think, and honestly, Mark, when we came on, 10 days ago, I saw more off-ramps then than I do now.
Yeah.
Because I think the sort of the top of the IRGC and the top of the Iranian leadership has consolidated its power. That doesn't mean I think that they're strong. I think they're fraying everywhere else. But that top tranche of leaders, I think, are digging in. And so I actually don't know where that off-ramp is right now.
Yeah. All right. I want to show you the president today on his acknowledgement that there's no coalition of the willing. It's an uncoalition of the unwilling. Here's the president today, number 13, please.
Not ready to leave yet, but we'll be leaving in the near future. We'll be leaving in pretty much the very near future. But right now they've been decimated from every standpoint. And again, we've had great support from countries in the Middle East, great support, but we've had no support from, essentially, no support from NATO.
And he announced there weren't going to be any. So, Fred, I can't think of an historical analog for this. Maybe you can, but people blame it on Greenland. They blame it on the terrorists, whatever. But if you were a national security advisor for the prime minister of the UK or France or any other country, or China even, that the president appealed to, would you have advised don't join the coalition?
I would advise them to join the coalition. It's very disappointing that countries like France and Germany and the UK are not with us. I think they have liberal governments and constituents who simply don't like President Trump, didn't like this initiative. I think Trump was right to go ahead without their support. We really could use their support right now just to try to get the Strait of Hormuz open, but we can open it without them. I think there's going to be a series of very heavy airstrikes along the coast of the Strait over the next couple of weeks. And then I think Trump's going to walk away and take the win. I think we have clearly won this. We've stopped Iran from getting nuclear weapons. We have broken up what would have become a missile shield. And I think the mark of a good president is to know when you've achieved your objectives and ready to declare victory. I think that's coming. The Strait of Hormuz is we can deal with it, but it's a shame that countries that rely on the Strait aren't prepared to help us defend it. It looks like we again will be stuck being the world's policeman.
One follow-up to you, and then I want the others to weigh in on the allies' decision. Does your walk away conclusion include leaving the enriched uranium in the hands of the Iranians?
You know, there's a lot of confusion about that. This is enriched uranium in a gaseous form, uranium hexafluoride. It is 60% enriched. It would take considerable technology to convert this into uranium metal and then put it into unfinished nuclear devices that probably have been already destroyed. This enriched uranium is deeply buried under facilities in Iran. And as you know, there are some conservatives who are saying on Fox News, let's send U.S. Special Forces into Iran to dig this stuff out and take it out. That's a terrible idea. This stuff may be unusable, but even if Iran could dig it out, they can't do anything with it for a long period of time. So I hope the Fox commentators and hosts who keep trying to gin up interest in sending troops in Iran to dig this crap out need to stop it. We can move on without this. If we see Iran building facilities to turn this enriched uranium gas into uranium metal, we'll bomb that. We'll keep an eye on it, but I'm not concerned about moving on.
Just one more follow, because to me, this is so critical. We're going to move, once the Strait is open, we're going to move to this question. How can you be sure that that's where it all is? How can you be sure that they didn't take some out? How can you be sure that some of it isn't more advanced than that?
They have to have the facilities to, first of all, further enrich this, then convert it into uranium metal, then fashion it into uranium hemispheres and put it into unfinished nuclear weapons. They then have to do a nuclear test, know that the nuclear design works. There has to be a test shaft somewhere. I don't believe Iran is capable of having a workable nuclear weapon for years. I know others who said differently. I've studied this for the CIA.
Yeah.
I don't want Iran that close, but they're not weeks away or months away from a weapon. They may have been weeks away from having enough enriched uranium in a gaseous form to make a weapon in June of last year. They were probably a year or more away when this war began. With all this infrastructure being destroyed, it's quite a ways away. I think that's reassuring. I still don't want them even being that close, but but I think we're going to keep a residual naval force in the Arabian Sea after Trump declares victory to keep an eye on things. And we have to watch. I'm hoping this regime is going to fall. It may not fall immediately, but I think it is in dire shape right now. And I hope the Iranian people can take back their country.
And of course, as you suggest, even if the president walks away and takes the win, there can be pressure continue to be put on them. There can be sorties whenever. There can be economic pressure. There can be communication pressure. Drop leaflet, the modern equivalent of dropping leaflets. So it doesn't mean give up forever, but we can stop the hostilities with the straight open. Eli, thoughts on what it means for the credibility of this president in the United States that he asked China and all the European countries and Japan and Korea to participate, and they all just gave him the finger. Thoughts on that?
Well, I take your point, but he didn't try very hard because he didn't really make much of a case for the war, either to Congress, the American people, or for that matter, the world. There was no UN Security Council process for this. And, I happen to think that he made the right decision, but I mean, I think NATO allies, I'm with Fred. They should, because it's in their interest, and it would be nice for them to kind of prove their mettle in a war like this, where Israel's clearly proving that it has made leaps and bounds as an air force in particular. But at the same time, I get it that, Trump spent, a couple days complaining about this. They said no, but it's not like we saw in the run-up to the Iraq War, where there was a huge effort to try to, get the votes at the UN Security Council, make the case to Congress. Everybody knew what the rationale was. Everybody knew what those arguments were. This time, there are a bunch of arguments that are made. Sometimes Trump sounds like it's a regime change war. Then Rubio says it's to make sure they don't have a conventional shield, so they build their nukes again. I think the best argument is basically, this is a revolutionary regime that has gallons of American blood on its hands. We have an opportunity because of the work that Israel's done to its proxy networks and its air defenses. So let's roll the dice and see if we can take them out. That's the best argument. But he doesn't want to make that argument, I think, in part because of the War Powers Act. There are some legal issues if he goes there. So he's improvising. And so I think one of the downsides of having that kind of unprecedented flexibility that you get with Trump, which he doesn't get locked into policy positions. He's not following the Colin Powell rule. If you break it, you own it. The downside is it's not going to be very effective diplomatically, because our allies are going to say, come on, you're giving us 3 days to try to make a decision to send an aircraft carrier or whatever we're going to send. So I acknowledge that they gave us the finger, but I don't think he really invested that much capital in it.
I mean, I think just, John, feel free to jump in as well. You and I have a lot of thoughts on this as the allies here on the call, both Australian. I think, look, this didn't happen in a vacuum, right? I think the sort of positioning of allies and the feelings of allies towards the US has been eroded over the course of the last 10 years. Not just from Trump 2.0, but from Trump 1.0 and then Biden's administration and the fraying of the international order. And I think, given, if you look back at sort of where things were in World War II, FDR and Churchill had actually agreed to the Atlantic Charter, which was, what do we actually want as the end state of this war? And I don't think any of this was really thought through, which, again, on the pro side, Eli, as you say, it means that we have maximum flexibility in terms of what it could be. But it also means that nobody understands what the strategic outcome should be and what it should look like. So all they can agree to is sort of these tactical assistance mechanisms, but we don't know what that partnership looks like in the future. John, come on in.
Yeah, I would just, at risk of agreeing too much on this call, which is never interesting, but I just, what's the national interest in it for a NATO country or Australia or South Korea to get involved in this? I mean, if the justification, Eli, as you've said, is a bit all over the place in terms of why they went in, other than generally Iran is bad and we're happy that, they're being degraded, it's either absolutely essential that we do it now because they're about to get a nuke. Brad, I think we all agree that that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to keep our foot on their throat, but it wasn't imminent. To degrade their military as a generally good thing, which I think is good, but isn't maybe the reason we went in right now. Or it's a strategic long-term, hey, these guys have threatened Israel. They have, they've destabilized the region. They've been doing it for too long. Enough is enough. In which case, as former diplomats, Helen and I would say, you go out and you talk to your allies first. You say, we've made a decision. This is happening. You need to get on board. You don't bomb the heck out of a country and then go, oh, by the way, come and join us because we're having a bit more trouble than we thought we would in this Hormuz bit. Oh, wait, you're not coming and joining us. Meanwhile, over the last 12 months going to Munich Security Conference and saying, Europe's a joke, you have no military, you have none of this, and like you can't do anything anyway. So I just think like if I was a European, Mark, your question was if I was advising, say, Emmanuel Macron, I would just say, what is our dog in this fight other than our alliance?
Fred said they had an interest. So Fred, what is their interest that they?
First of all, I note that I'm very happy that Canada and Australia are actually backing the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran. I don't think Iran was going to get a nuclear weapon in the next year or so, but the risk here was that Iran was assembling what would be a missile shield that was going to protect its nuclear weapons development that we were not going to be able to challenge by the end of this year. That was the urgent threat. Not that they had a nuclear weapon around the corner, the missile shield. Marco Rubio has been very clear about that. They were making about 100 missiles a month. They may have almost built back their arsenal from last June. This was the real threat. And with that missile shield, there would have been nothing we could have done to blow up these nuclear sites that they are rebuilding. It takes longer to rebuild them. So to argue that there was an imminent threat, I don't agree with that. I think there was an imminent threat. It just hasn't been defined well enough.
If I was advising the allied foreign ministries in Europe, what I would say is you want to join the war because America and Israel are going to win. And America is going to become more powerful, and you want to be on the ground floor, and you want to prove militarily that your equipment and that your militaries are up to the task. Because there is this question, which I think is lingering in the background, a deep question, which is not military so much as cultural. There was a survey of Germans like under 30, and the majority of them said they wouldn't fight in the German army even if Germany was invaded. Now, I don't think you can really have a military if you don't have some basic baseline that the military culture is there, at least, that you're willing to fight. So this would have been an opportunity, I think, to bandwagon with a more powerful country to kind of get some of those reps under your belt and to prove that, no, wait a second, we are good 21st century allies. We can fight in a war like this. So there was a benefit there. But at the same time, I totally agree. There wasn't really any diplomacy for it, and I think that that could have been handled better.
I think NATO was also preoccupied. Mark, sorry. I think NATO was also very preoccupied with its other theater, right? Russia and Ukraine, which a lot of folks have dropped off the headlines for the last little while. But also, I do think there is a distinction between sort of the APAC, Indo-Pacific allies as well as the European ones, right? For Australia and for India, well, not India. India is a multipolar party these days, but for Japan and others who are reliant on energy, I think their calculations are different. But I do think they're very beholden to their domestic constituents as well, which is a very hard sell if you're sort of selling this war, which feels very remote.
Yeah, I'll say, Eli, the only flaw I see in your argument is I'm not sure they actually are up to participating at a high level. Just as I wonder about the Chinese army. Like, if you never do anything, hard to know if it'll actually work.
Well, anyway, and Mark, the Chinese are very worried about that themselves. So that's why they watch this stuff really carefully.
100%.
Now, I'm calling an audible here because their hands up, and I really want to get everyone an opportunity to talk to this extremely awesome panel. We're not going to talk about Joe Kent. Some people will think that's an outrage, but to me, it's a bit of a sideshow. And we're not going to talk about the new Wall Street Journal story reporting yet again that the Russians are helping the Iranians pretty extensively, which is, again, kind of a crazy thing. In any event, let me do two poly markets, and then we're going to go to your questions. So please put your hand up if you'd like to get in it. Number 20, please. This is from our colleagues, partners at Polymarket. Will the U.S. invade Iran by the end of the month? That's 2 weeks away here. Will there be an invasion by the end of the month? Down to 18%. It's been up a little bit higher, but 18% of an invasion. I wonder if they'll pay out if they just go on to Karg or not, whether that counts. Presumably it would. And then the other poly market I want to show you, number 21. Will the Strait of Hormuz traffic return to normal by the end of April? Only 26% say yes, and that's down towards the low point. A little bit surprising. Maybe they're big fans of the French Navy and think without the participation of the French, it's not going to happen. We're going to go to your questions now. We may cover some other topics, but I do want to get to questions. So if you want to be on the conversation, please raise your hand. I'll bring you in. Unmute yourself. Say where you are, and then your question for Eli and John and Helen and Fred. And thank you for being part of Two Way. And we'll start with Ryan. Ryan, welcome in.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mark. This is for John and Helen, the Aussies in the group. One thing that surprises me is that both South Korea and Japan are heavily reliant on oil out of the Strait of Hormuz. Are you surprised that they didn't agree to send a minesweeper or any sort of boat along to free up the strait? It's it affects them more than it affects the United States or Europe. And
Yeah.
if they expect us to have their back when it comes to, say, Taiwan, you'd think they'd throw a bone here. It's a pretty low cost way to throw the US a bone.
Yes, sir. Great question. John and Helen.
Yeah, I mean, I think in short, I was surprised, but you've got to remember that the South Koreans have already given up their THAAD, or the US THAAD, which is a missile interceptor system that they've given to the Gulf. And so I think this is not a done deal yet. I think right now they're reconsidering all their options. I mean, you saw how impacted South Korea's markets were in the first week, or the first, I think, Monday of the war. So I do think that they're going to have to recalculate everything. But Japan famously, has had a very pacifist defense posture. And so this is happening in the context of all of that history as well.
Yeah,
John, your
although
thoughts?
the prime minister's coming later in the week to meet with the president. I
Yeah.
wonder if she's going to be sick that day, because I hate to think how she'll be treated in the Oval. John?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was surprised. As I said before, I think that if I was in the position, I probably wouldn't get involved in this war myself. But it's also, I think, interesting to know that the Straits of Hormuz are closed-ish, right? Like Iran is letting some ships pass through. I think there's been a couple of Indian ships get through, a couple of Chinese ships, and some others. So there's an argument that Tehran is playing it quite sensibly, in the sense of, like, if you send people to get involved, then we definitely won't let your ships get through. We definitely won't let the oil that's destined for your countries to get through. It's this kind of, quite clever way of saying, hey, we're open for business, just not to our enemies. And, I'm not sure if it's working or not, but yeah.
Great question, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks,
All
Ryan.
right, here's a quiz for the panel. Joe Kent, again, who resigned today, accusing the United States of going into a war when there was no threat, and doing it at the behest of not just the Israelis, but of the American Jewish lobby. Guess what he's doing tomorrow? Fred, guess what Joe Kent's doing tomorrow?
I know.
I don't know.
All right,
Tucker.
Eli, if you know, he's going on Tucker. Did you
Of course
know,
he
or
is.
did you guess?
I
That makes
guessed.
sense.
Yeah,
I guessed, but of course he's going on. Tucker.
yeah, that's going to be a highly rated episode. It might even beat the numbers that I got when I went on Tucker. Also, let's see. I don't know what this means. Let's see. He's going to address the Catholic Prayer for America Gala in 2 days in Washington, at St. Joseph's in Washington, D.C. So now we don't know what he's doing Wednesday and Thursday. Interesting. All right, let's go in. Michael, welcome in. Unmute, tell folks where you are, what's on your mind for our guests, and I like what you're wearing, dude.
Yeah, great merch, Mike.
Thank you. And by the way, I love this Fairway to Green merch. It's way better than Peter Millar. So just
It is. I say it makes Peter Millar look like Banana Republic.
It does. I mean, the zipper is just amazing. Let alone the rest of it. So I'm a 6-time Trump voter, and I was all about no more regime change wars. So I was against this war. But once we were in it, I wanted to support it because I care about our troops and I want us to win, and win quickly. But as long as Iran can disrupt shipping and Gulf states oil production, they don't need to win. They just need to survive and watch oil spike. And that will create global pressure. And that also makes de-escalation harder, because if we just try to pull out, there's no guarantee that they'll open the strait.
Great.
And it also gives them leverage to stay in power at home, to do the propaganda war, saying we've brought the U.S. to heel, and so forth. So I've got 2 questions. The first is, do you think the U.S. can actually win without putting troops on the ground? And if so, what happens to the America First coalition? And then my second question is, if America knows is that we are vehemently opposed to boots on the ground, what's to stop them from making unreasonable demands of Israel, for example? They disarm, or they get rid of the Iron Dome, and then that sort of boxes us in too, because it's not a realistic thing.
Michael, those are great questions. Let's let Fred have first crack at them, and then Eli.
Well, I wrote an article in American Greatness that had touched on these issues that appeared on Friday. I have another one in the Washington Times that will appear on Wednesday or Thursday. Our objectives was to stop the nuclear program and the missile program. And I don't think regime change was an objective, but I think weakening the regime was. This regime is going to come out with greatly diminished capacities to project power abroad and to suppress its people. No one thought we would change this regime from the air. We know you can't conquer countries from the air. You have to have ground troops. We weaken the regime as much as we can. I think we will address the threats to the Strait with intensive bombings over the next couple of weeks. And then Trump's going to say, we won this. We did what we set out to do. There's still going to be a residual regime. I hope it is overthrown. We may have to manage it long term. There may not be a way to completely wipe it out, but it is substantially weakened. It is a substantial win for promoting global security. I want this over. Trump said this was going to be temporary, 4 to 5 weeks. That's America first for me, and absolutely positively no troops on Carg Island, no troops to dig out enriched uranium, no troops along the Straits of Hormuz. That's something I think crosses the line. It's an unnecessary risk to our troops, and I don't think President Trump's going to do that. I think we're going to see this operation wind down after some intensive bombings over the next couple of weeks. The media is going to claim it's not a win because the regime's is still there. That's just a fake argument. No matter what Trump does, they're going to say it's a failure. This is already a win.
Fred, I couldn't agree with you more. For Eli.
Well, I would go back to sort of what brought the sort of no endless wars and how did that become a mainstream position in both parties. And to me, it was not the idea that you can't have a war. It was the idea that America would be responsible for nation building and peacekeeping. And it was when we put our soldiers at checkpoints in the middle of Baghdad and Kabul, and we trained police officers, which is the vast majority of those wars, that they became endless wars. Initially, the wars were popular, as the wars usually are at first. And I can't see Trump getting us into any kind of nation building project in Iran. And so that, I think, is one area. But the other thing is this. I think what Trump was saying, and he says a lot of things, so I'm not trying to cherry pick, but I think his consistent question was, why don't we win anymore? And I think he wants to win wars and quickly, as opposed to what the endless wars where there is no real outcome. I think
there's an outcome. It's winning quickly versus losing slowly.
Exactly. So I think that's a great way to put it. And I think that Trump will declare victory. I think Fred's right that there will be, a lot of media, but I'm not so sure that the regime survives much longer, even if they hang on after the war. Part of that's because we know since 1999 there has been great dissatisfaction across the Iranian population with the regime. I think they've been facing a legitimation crisis. They will have the instruments of repression, which Israel's been targeting, will be battered. And just because, the U.S. will say that it's over, I don't necessarily think that the Mossad will be leaving. Yeah. And what we've seen is there's a lot of evidence right now that Israel's spies and other kind of, folks in the shadow, at least from a shadow war perspective, have an unprecedented mastery of Iran, not just the regime, but I think they are in their telecom networks. They're in their traffic cameras. They are everywhere. And that, I think, does change that dynamic. It's a good thing Israel's an ally, and in this particular case, I think they share America's interest. So what you may get is a declaration of victory, regime sticks around, but let's wait 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. And that is kind of what happened if you think about when the protests started in December. That was that was like 5 months, 6 months after the June war. So I would look at that, except this time, that we have the prospect of, the Israelis helping in the shadows and in the skies.
Yeah, Eli, I couldn't agree more with what you said too. The only thing I'd add, and maybe you alluded to it, but the economy was horrendous before this conflict, and that's why they had all the people in the street. Except if you're in the lumber business, the economy in Iran's not going to be great when the war ends because everything's destroyed, and so people are going to say to the government, well, what are you doing to make sure we can eat and work? I mean, there's going to be nothing to do for a living, even more so than before. Michael, thank you. All right, let me get a quick sponsor in, and then we'll talk a little bit about Joe Kent, just because I want to show everybody what the president said about it, and then get everybody's reaction to the fact that the president of the United States is talking about Joe Kent, which surprised me a little bit. Last sponsor of the night is Factor. It's dinner time, at least here in the East Coast, and if you're looking for a way to not have to go to the grocery store, not have to cook, not have to clean, not have to worry about whether what you're making is healthy. The answer could be for you, the folks at Factor. It's a subscription service with real healthy food, real protein, real vegetables. You just go on the website, you order what you want. You can make some specifications about the kind of diet you want to be on, and they'll just send you a bunch of meals. Take them out of the refrigerator, 2 or 3 minutes, oven or microwave. Eat it, great portion size. Throw it away, throw the packaging away. 50% off your first order right now, first box, plus free breakfast for a year. Factormeals.com/2waytonight50 off. Factormeals.com/2waytonight50 off. No artificial sweeteners, no refined sugars. This is good food. And again, you don't have to worry about whether it's healthy. Everything in there is healthy. Go to factormeals.com, promo code, or factormeals.com, /2waytonight50 off. All right, Joe Kent. He's been on my radar for a while because he ran for Congress. Kind of an outspoken guy, and he quit today. And as I said, he blamed Israel. He blamed the Israeli-American lobby. And he said it was a war. It was a war of choice, basically, and a misguided war. And there's a lot of speculation about whether this will lead other people to resign. He met with the vice president yesterday. He had the sway to do that with Tulsi Gabbard. And the vice president, according to the Washington Post, urged him to talk to Susie Wiles and others. Here's the president today talking about Joe Kent. This is number seven. Number 7, please.
Guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if, I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there, loaded with cash, hundreds of millions of dollars? You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful, they said hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember. Hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think they had 2 of them loaded. They took the seats out and they put cash. And it was so much that there wasn't a bank in Virginia, Maryland, or D.C. that had any money left. They stripped them of all their money, put it into place, sent it to Iran, almost as ransom. That's not going to happen with Trump. And nobody ever did anything about it. Nobody ever said anything about it.
So, Joe Kent chose to put his resignation letter on Twitter. The opposition research is now coming out. I could read you these Joe Kent statements on previously on X from January of 20, from September of 24, from October of 24. Here's one, just excerpt from one. Trump has a plan. He has definitely earned the confidence of any clear-eyed observer. Red line is American loss of life or Iranian nuclear development. I personally think we should have crushed their ballistic and nuclear capabilities. It goes on. This guy's chosen to be now more in the spotlight than ever. Helen, if he had asked you, would you have advised him to quit quietly or to make a big spectacle of it as he's done?
If who asked me?
If Joe Kent said to you, I'm going to resign because I think the war is illegitimate and I blame the Israelis, I'm thinking of putting my resignation letter on X or doing it quietly, what would you have told him to do?
I mean, I think I would have advised him to quit loudly. I mean, that's the whole point. He's making a political statement, right? There's no point of cashing in that check if you're not going to quit loudly. I think given everything that he stands for, he obviously wants to spin this and get something out of it as well. And so this is his only chance to cash in that check.
Well, what's he getting?
Mark,
go ahead, John. And
well, I was going to say, you understand the kind of MAGA movement far more than I do. I'm obviously not domestically political in America, being a guest in your fine country. But it strikes me that his statement, if you take out the sort of leaning towards Tucker Carlson kind of anti-Semitic tropes in there, which I found a little troubling about kind of blaming everything on Israel, that was my understanding of MAGA's view of Trump's second term. Was he seems pretty aligned with me on that, like no intervention in war. It doesn't matter if your country's going to hell. It doesn't matter if you're we are not the world's policeman anymore. And that was Trump 2.0. And I just look, it's a question more for you folks who channel the domestic politics more, but it strikes me that there's a big group of MAGA Republicans who would agree with that.
Yeah. Fred.
Well, Trump made clear that the America First approach to U.S. national security means he's going to keep us out of unnecessary wars, but will sometimes use military force when he has to defend our national security. And one of them is to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. He explained that last June. I remember Tucker Carlson didn't agree. The president was pretty critical over that. But I thought this letter from Kent was so disappointing. I like the idea of administration officials resigning when they don't like policies. I wish more had resigned in the first Trump term rather than sticking around and trying to undermine what Trump wanted to do. But to leave and to lie about Trump's policies and then to engage in this anti-Semitism and Israel hatred, it really was, I thought, disgusting. And I think he should be ashamed of himself.
Eli, the two-way community and the polls match up. MAGA is pretty supportive of this effort. And even people we've heard this week who said, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought Trump would do. Most of them, as we've heard tonight, say, but it's underway, and so we'll support the president and hope it ends quickly. Do you think, as some do, that Ken could be nose under the camel's tent, if that's the right metaphor, and we could now see other people resign or other people criticize the president in ways that he hasn't faced from MAGA over too many things?
Well, I mean, two answers there. I mean, one is it depends on how the war goes. If it's a success, he's going to be out there, leading a one-man parade. But I think it's interesting from the perspective of I'm thinking about J.D. Vance right now, and I'm thinking about with friends like Joe Kent, who needs enemies? Because what position does this put the vice president, who has staked out his kind of political position as somebody who was against the endless wars? He has so far maintained his friendship with Tucker Carlson, even though now Trump has turned on him and saying, I'm MAGA, you're not MAGA. And J.D. Vance needs Trump in the 28 primaries, and he probably also needs Tucker. And he needs, he's got, that's his theory of how, he wins the election, is he's got Turning Point USA, Tucker Carlson, and the blessings from Donald Trump. And now you've got this guy who nobody knew about, showing a kind of bravery to the anti-interventionist wing of MAGA. And J.D. Vance can't get out there and say, I didn't like the war either. He's the vice president. He's got to salute the commander in chief. So I think it really puts him in a bind. It puts everybody who stays in the Trump administration, but who was part of that kind of anti-endless wars, America First wing of MAGA, in my view, he puts them in a really difficult position.
Yeah, well said. Arjun, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, and a question for Eli, Fred, John, and Helen.
I'm calling in from Ottawa, Canada. My question is about people talking about the legality of the war. I recently listened to a podcast that came out today by Steve Paikin, a Canadian Mark Halperin, if you will, and he did an interview with a Queen's University professor of international law who said the war is illegal, and he made two quotes. I'll paraphrase it real quick. He said one thing, which was that there is no existential threat to Israel because Israel's a nuclear power, and the second statement he made was international law doesn't care about whether how states conduct themselves locally. And I thought both of those statements were sort of a reflection of the sort of international law that would be feasible in 20th century geopolitics. But then when we're in 21st century, where we have things like drone warfare, we have cyber attacks, we have grand ideas about glorifying death, or those sorts of things which we're also fighting against at the same time. Shouldn't international law be evolving to make provisions for these things as well?
Yeah.
Go
ahead, finish up if you would.
Yeah, that was my question, basically.
Great topic. Who wants to take that?
I'd love to, and I think you're raising a very good point. So here's the way that I would fix international law. I would say that if you're a country like Iran that has lived outside, has been an outlaw regime for its entire existence, starting, with the taking of our hostages and everything it does, it sponsors terrorism. It basically exists to spread the Islamic Revolution. So Iran exists outside of international law. So at a certain point, there needs to be a process for basically revoking the sovereignty of states that act to undermine the international system. And we don't have that right now. So I mean, technically, I think you're right. There was no UN Security Council resolution. Uh,
And
you
there
know,
wouldn't have been.
and there
It wouldn't
wouldn't have
have
been, right?
passed.
So I mean, but what do you do when you're facing an adversary that sponsors terrorism throughout the entire world, and particularly in the region, that effectively has hollowed out the state of Lebanon, kind of creating a state within a state through Hezbollah, that sided with Bashar al-Assad when he used chemical weapons and killed hundreds of thousands of his own people? That is a menace to the Republic of Leathers. Think about the fatwa against Salman Rushdie and the translators, and the fact that Salman Rushdie, one of our great authors, was blinded as a result of this. So I just have no sympathy for the argument because Iran is such a rogue state at this point that I don't think it should get the benefits of sovereignty to begin with. But again, that's a new conception. So that's how I would start.
I would love to address Arjun's point,
Go
which I
ahead,
think
please.
is just more pertinently, why does not international law not evolve with the world that we're living in? And I totally agree, Arjun. I mean, both John and I are lawyers as well, and we studied international law. And international law is a consensus-based driven. It's more similar to common law than it is to code law, right? Which is what a lot of the European and US laws are based on. And that is a huge fallacy because a lot of the laws are toothless. And so it depends on consensus building and norms, international norms. And of course, these never evolve quick enough. And so in the last 20 years, it's been incapable of, or been very difficult to sort of try and regulate things like cyber technology, drones, AI, etc. And so, of course, warfare and the way that war is fought is unfortunately one of those areas. But actually, funnily enough, I think jus in bello, so sort of the war of law, is actually one of the more defined aspects of international law. But it requires, again, state consensus, which we do not have. John's actually a sea law lawyer.
Arjun,
If
thank
you
you.
ask him about sea law, he can chew your ears off for days.
Croft, if you can be quick, I'll let you in, but you got to be quick because we're up against the clock.
Sure thing. Just want to talk about decapitation of leadership as a war tactic and what it's going to mean in the future and how this, because it changes old men smoking cigars and drinking scotch and sending young men off to war. What does this mean in the future of warfare?
Yeah, great question. I've been talking about this from day one. Who wants to tackle that? What that means for and Rand Paul, for instance, raises this all the time. He raised it about the taking of Maduro. Same thing. Can other countries come take the president of the United States if they've indicted our president? So, who wants to talk about what this means for the future of warfare? Anybody?
I think the precedent of killing heads of state is a very troubling one, and that's why it was made illegal under U.S. law. It's why the U.S. did not bomb the Ayatollah. The Israelis did. I think there will be implications from this campaign for international law, for the law of warfare that we're going to be studying for some time today. I think the apple cart has been upset in so many ways in this operation. I think it was necessary. I think it was ugly. I agree with Eli that Iran was operating outside international law, that there was no way to use the norms of international law to deal with this because China and Russia would veto a UN Security Council resolution. So Iran was able to hide behind them. So Trump wouldn't let that happen any longer because he's a rules breaker. He's an unprecedented leader. But still, we have new precedents and consequences from this conflict that we haven't quite sorted out yet.
Yeah.
Also, can I just say, woe to any country that thinks international law will protect them. No, armies protect countries. Intelligence services protect countries. And international law is important, and I think it could work if everybody was in a transparent, open democracy. But that's not the world we live in. So, you know.
That's right. I will just say on Mark on that
Yeah.
assassinating leaders. The key there is that asymmetric warfare has never been easier or cheaper in the sense that drones can now kill people very
Yeah.
easily. And
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years ago, that was you needed probably the US and a couple of other countries were the only ones capable of this kind of stuff. Now I think random militias in Sudan that get funded and supplied by North Korea could do it. So it's going to be a problem.
Or have an Amazon account.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tomorrow, Tulsi Gabbard's due to testify on House Intelligence Committee. Is the annual threat assessment hearing, but the timing is
Good luck with that, Tulsi.
compelling. Yeah. The president expects all of his cabinet members to do a good job testifying. And her tweet tonight in the aftermath of Kent's resignation was tortured language, which I'm sure she didn't write entirely by herself. And she's going to have to figure out how to sit up there tomorrow and answer some pretty tough questions. Very grateful to Fred for coming on for the first time, and for Eli and John and Helen for coming back. Couldn't be more grateful to you for spending the hour with us and helping educate everybody, including me. Grateful to you all for the two-way community. And tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, morning meeting will be on, and we'll have plenty to cover overnight, I'm quite sure, and we'll be back here in 23 hours. Thank you for everybody for spending the time. Have a good evening. I'll see you at 9 a.m.